10. The 30 Years' War. The bloody war in Europe, which took place between 1618 and 1648, became known as the 30 Years' War. The war was sparked by the Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand II, who wanted to unify the formerly feudal empire into a Spanish-style absolute monarchy. To this end, he harshly persecuted Protestants, using religion as an entry point to his dream of unification. The tyranny first led to an uprising of Protestants in Bohemia, which was quickly and brutally suppressed by the imperial army. But the first dominoes fell, and a chain reaction began. The first Protestant state, Denmark, challenged the emperor. The emperor used the legendary mercenary leader Wallenstein to defeat Denmark. An even more powerful enemy followed, the great military genius, King Gustav II of Sweden, who led the new Swedish army and declared war on the empire. The empire escaped when the dominant Swedish army lost its commander and had to retreat. The emperor, fearing a repeat of the story of the Roman general Marius, sent assassins to kill Wallenstein, and the two great heroes of Europe fell in quick succession. France, which had been opposing the Holy Roman Empire behind the scenes, could not resist and openly marched against the empire, which was also Catholic, but at this time the interests of the monarch and the state took precedence over religion. In the beginning, the French army was defeated, and then they retorted and defeated the allied forces of the empire and Spain. When the Swedish army returned, the Franco-Swedish alliance won successive victories. The imperial army was unable to fight anymore, and the emperor was forced to sign the Treaty of Westphalia, which is also known as the First International Convention of modern times. 8 million people died in the 30 Years' War, mostly from famine and disease. 1 in 2 people lost their lives in the Germanic areas. 9. The Chinese Civil War. The Chinese Civil War refers to the war that broke out between the Chinese nationalist government and the Chinese Communist Party in the 20th century. The decades-long war was divided into 2 phases. The first phase took place between 1927 and 1936, when the Communists and the Kuomintang, both backed by the Soviet Union, joined forces to defeat the Roxby-Yang forces. After their victory, the Kuomintang considered the Communists to be the greatest threat, and began to exterminate the Communist Red Army. The Red Army was forced to flee. After fleeing to the remote Yan'an region of Shaanxi, the Communists cleverly exploited the conflict between the Northeastern Army and the nationalist government, kidnapping the leader of the Republican government, Chiang Kai-shek, and forcing the Republican government to abandon its efforts to exterminate the Communists, in return for which, the Communists recognized the legitimacy of the Republican government and joined in the war against Japan. After Japan is completely defeated by the United States, war breaks out again between the 2 parties. The second phase of the Civil War began. With the full assistance of the Soviet Union, the Communists took over the Japanese Manchu Kuo army and weapons, and built up one of the most powerful armies in China at the time, led by Lin Biao, the most famous communist general, who continuously defeated the army of government. The then corrupt and incompetent government of Chiang Kai-shek was abandoned by the United States, and the government's army was defeated by internal and external troubles, fleeing to Taiwan in 1949 in complete defeat, while the Communist Party of China established the People's Republic of China that year, and won the Civil War. Nearly 10 million soldiers and civilians died during the long Civil War. The widespread use of human tactics by both armies, and the brutal war policies adopted by each side towards the other's occupied territories, were the main reasons for the large number of casualties. 8. The Russian Civil War. The Russian Civil War was a multi-side war, fought in Russia between 1917 and 1926. The Communist Red Army and the White Army of Tsarist Russia were the main participants, while Western countries and Japan also sent interventionist forces to fight against the Red Army in Russia. Many of the former vassal states of Tsarist Russia took the opportunity to become independent, and were also part of this war. The Red Army fought the enemy on many fronts, and through brutal and effective means, the Communist Party seized as many resources as possible to supply the army, eventually defeating most of the enemy and maintaining the Red Soviet Empire. The war saw 300,000 soldiers die on both sides, while another 450,000 died of disease. But many more deaths came from the Great Purges on both sides. The Bolshevik regime, in particular, executed 1 million people in the Secret Service Cheka alone. And millions of lives were also lost in the purges of the Cossacks, the plundering and extermination of Ukraine. Some 3 to 5 million people died in this civil war. 7. The Chinese Tongzhi Rebellion. The Chinese Hui Rebellion, which took place between 1862 and 1877, was a messy and complex religious war. Because the Muslim community in China, known as the Hui, was highly organized under religious ties, and rather unruly compared to the fragile and tame Han Chinese community, the Manchu government resorted to suppressing the Hui and stirring up the confrontation between the Hui and the Han to govern the Hui community living in Shaanxi, Gansu, and Ningxia. As the Manchu government's control over the northwest declined, because of the Taiping Rebellion in the south and the Nian Rebellion in the north, the long-established Hui groups began to riot, driven by a series of incidental events and rumors. They massacred local officials and Han civilians in large numbers. As the conflict expanded, the Qing dynasty mobilized Zhou Zhongtang, a Hunan general who had fought against the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, to suppress the rebellion, and the army led by Zhou Zhongtang joined local Han militias in a retaliatory massacre of the Hui. Lacking resources and struggling to unite, the various rebel forces were finally wiped out or surrendered after several years of war. This religious war is said to have killed between 15 and 20 million people, and reduced the population of Gansu and Shaanxi by 75%. 6. The First World War. The First World War was one of the two most influential wars of modern times, and its effects continue to this day, changing the picture of world development. Starting in the Balkans, the fighting spread throughout Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and the Far East. On the European continent, in particular, the blood of a generation of young men stained the soil of Europe. Tanks, gas, and airplanes, the latest weapons of the time, were used to kill countless people. Throughout the Great War, 9 million soldiers died, close to 10 million civilians lost their lives, and in addition to those who died directly from the war, secondary disasters such as disease, famine, and riots caused by the war killed between 50 million and 100 million other people. 5. The Sino-Japanese War. The Sino-Japanese War was a war that took place between the Republic of China and the Japanese Empire, beginning in 1937 and ending in 1945. It is generally considered to be part of the Second World War. The war is considered to be one of the bloodiest wars of the 20th century, due to the adventurous nature of the radical wing of the Japanese army, which attempted to extend its control from the Manchurian region to northern China, while the government of the Republic of China took the initiative to attack the Japanese army in the Japanese concession in Shanghai, to allow the Western powers to interfere in the situation in China. Despite being at an absolute disadvantage against the Japanese, the Chinese army continued to fight the Japanese army. Most of China was occupied by Japan, but with Japan's military adventures in the Pacific, the United States and Japan began direct combat. To fight the United States, Japan moved a large number of Japanese troops from China to the Pacific theater, allowing China to catch its breath. And as American forces crushed Japanese military forces, Japan finally surrendered, and China was able to hold out until the end. The Sino-Japanese War resulted in the deaths of nearly 30 million people, 25 million of whom were civilians. Japan lost hundreds of thousands of servicemen in China, while millions of Chinese soldiers died in battle. 4. Manchu and Ming War. The Manchu-Qing War of Conquest of the Ming regime refers to the war that took place between 1618 and 1638, between the Ming government forces, a large number of peasant rebels, and the Manchu army. Because of the severe financial burden caused by successive years of war between the Ming and Manchu dynasties, the northern peasants were already overburdened with taxes, and the agricultural economy collapsed due to the prolonged drought during the Little Ice Age. A massive peasant uprising took place in the north of the Ming dynasty, and the more the Ming army suppressed it, the larger the rebellion became, culminating in the rebellion's invasion of Beijing and the suicide of the Ming emperor. And the Manchu army took the opportunity to invade the Ming dynasty. The peasant rebels were forced to unite with the remaining Ming army against the Manchu army, and after years of resistance, they were still defeated by the Manchu army. During the war, the peasant rebels, the Ming army, and the Manchu army, all three parties practiced a very cruel policy of massacre. And Sichuan, once a large population province, was almost killed off after being massacred by many sides. The exact number of people killed throughout the war is untraceable, but a rough estimate is that over 50 million people died directly or indirectly as a result of this brutal war. 3. Anshu Rebellion. The Anshu Rebellion was a large-scale civil war that took place in 755 AD in the Tang Dynasty of China. The Tang Dynasty was an empire founded by the Xianbei people of the north, and is generally considered to be one of the many Chinese empires. The Tang Emperor, who was a Xianbei, recruited a large number of northern nomads to serve the empire as an army. The unruly nomads were more suitable warriors than the tame, but weak Confucianist Han Chinese of the Middle Kingdom. These armies contributed to the expansion of the empire, but their generals also gained a great deal of power as a result. Lu Shan and Shi Si Ming were two of the toughest generals. There is evidence that Lu Shan was a half-breed of Persian ancestry, and they both commanded powerful armies who decided to rebel against the Tang Emperor and set themselves up as kings. The emperor enlisted the armies of other northern peoples to fight the rebels, such as the famous general Gao Xianji, who was a Goguryeo, the predecessor of the current Koreans. After years of repeated campaigns, the Tang army finally quelled the rebellion, but the war also decimated the prosperous empire. According to the official Tang census, the war resulted in the deaths of 36 million people, a staggering figure for the world at the time. 2. The Taiping Rebellion. The Taiping Rebellion was a civil war between the Taiping rebels and the Manchu army, which took place between 1850 and 1864. The Taiping Rebellion was launched in the south of the Manchu Empire, and the leader, Hong Xiuquan, used indigenized Christianity as a rallying cry, quickly sweeping through the southern provinces, leaving the already corrupt Manchu army unable to resist. But after the Taiping army captured China's richest provinces in Jiangnan, they slowed down their attacks, and infighting broke out. The Qing court allowed the provinces to organize armies to fight against the Taiping force, and they received arms support from the Western powers. The strongest of the provincial militias, the Xiang army, eventually defeated the Taiping army, ending a rebellion that threatened the very existence of the Manchus. During the war, both sides used very brutal methods of warfare against each other, with massacres commonplace, and often a city was repeatedly slaughtered, as it was repeatedly fought over. The Taiping army also killed each other in internal strife, with hundreds of thousands killed in the infighting. The number of soldiers and civilians who died directly in the war is estimated to be in the tens of millions. while a rough estimate of nearly 46 to 95 million people died as a result of flight, famine, disease, and other causes. The Taiping War is considered to be one of the deadliest civil wars in human history, and the largest war of the 19th century. 1. The Second World War. World War II refers to the massive global war that took place from 1939 to 1945, and involved almost every country and region of the world at the time. Two rival military alliances, the Axis and the Allies, fought an all-out war for almost 6 years, resulting in the deaths of millions of people and the destruction of countless towns and villages. In all, 100 million soldiers from some 30 different countries joined the war, and some 70 million people died. Of these, nearly 20 million were soldiers, and another 40 to 50 million were civilians. The war between the Soviet Union and Germany alone caused the deaths of almost 27 million people. The war killed many people directly, and many more died from war-induced disease, starvation, riots, and pogroms. The Second World War is considered to be the bloodiest war in human history.